has been widespread condemnation from the international community over pockets of violence and also killings during Ghana's December 7 presidential and parliamentary elections.
Despite a few minor challenges, the conduct of the 2024 general election was largely peaceful.
And of course, as commendations pour in for President-elect John Dramani Mahama, the United States government is asking for investigations into circumstances surrounding the unfortunate deaths that is characterizing this year's elections. Hello there and welcome to Connect Africa with me, Blessed Sugan. We are live on DSTV channel 421 and GoTV channel 125. We take you around the continent, and when we return, we talk about Ghana's democratic process.
Zambia's top court has barred former President Edgar Lungu from standing for re-election in 2026. The Constitutional Court ruled that the 68-year-old politician had already served the maximum 2 terms allowed by law. Lungu was first elected president in January 2015 to serve the remaining 20 months of his predecessor's term. President Michael Sata had died in office in October 2014. President Lungu had argued that this should not count as he did not serve a full 5-year term. But the court disagreed, reversing previous rulings that had cleared him to run 3 years ago when he lost to Hakainde Hichilema. The court ruled Edgar Chagwa Lungu has therefore been twice elected and has held office twice, making him ineligible to participate in any future elections as presidential candidate. A court in France has found French-Cameroonian author Charles Onana guilty of downplaying the Rwandan genocide. The 60-year-old writer was fined €8,400 and Damien Sirix, his publishing, was ordered to pay €5,000. They are also required to pay €11,000 in compensation to human rights organizations that filed the suit. The Paris court ruled that Onana's writings violated France's laws prohibiting genocide denial and incitement to hatred, noting that France would, quote, no longer be a haven for denialists. In just 100 days in 1994, about 800,000 people were killed in Rwanda by ethnic Hutu extremists. France has flown out 2 Mirage fighter jets it had stationed in Chad on Tuesday, signaling the beginning of the withdrawal of its military forces from the former French colony in Central Africa that last month broke off its defense cooperation agreement with Paris. The pair of Mirage 2000D fighters took off after midday from a French base in the capital, N'Djamena, after Chadian military forces came to wish them farewell and were returning to a French Air Force base in Nancy in eastern France. French military spokesperson Colonel Guillaume Vernet added that negotiations with Chadian authorities were continuing on how and when France might withdraw other members of its 1,000-strong force in Chad and whether all or just some of them will leave. An apartment building has collapsed in Egypt's capital, killing at least 8 people. The health ministry said in a statement that the collapse of the 6-story building in Cairo's western neighborhood of Waili also injured 3 people who were hospitalized. Cairo's governor, Ibrahim Sabeh, ordered the evacuation of neighboring houses as a precautionary measure, according to a statement from the governor's office. It isn't immediately clear what caused the building, which was constructed in the 1960s, to collapse. The governor's office said prosecutors were investigating. Building collapses are common in Egypt, where shoddy construction and a lack of maintenance are widespread in shanty towns, poor city neighborhoods, and rural areas.
Well, tonight our focus is on Ghana because there's widespread condemnation from the international community over pockets of violence and also killings during Ghana's December presidential and parliamentary elections. Now, according to 3 international observers of Ghana's elections, including the African Union, Ghana's elections were largely successful, but for the pockets of unrest and also killings recorded during this year's election.
Despite a few minor challenges, the conduct of the 2024 general election was largely peaceful and to a significant extent complies with the national and regional normative framework. The professionalism of the polling staff and the effective presence of security agents at polling venues ensured that Ghanaian voters were able to freely and secretly express their choice in an atmosphere that guaranteed their safety. However, The mission was made aware and regretted the isolated security incident at Yampala in the northern region, which led to the death of one person and injury to another.
We commend the Electoral Commission, polling staff, political parties, police, and the media for their respective roles in ensuring the successful conduct of the elections in Ghana thus far. We also commend Vice President Bawumia for his statesmanship in concession speech. It was essential in de-escalating potential tension.
On ballot security, consider measures to mitigate the production of counterfeit ballot papers by improving the security features of the ballot papers. Polling stations, increase the number of polling stations in sparsely populated areas in order to reduce the distances between polling stations, particularly in rural areas.
Well, these three international bodies are not the only ones wading into Ghana's presidential and parliamentary elections, because the United States of America is also witnessing some level of similarity in terms of outcome of this year's elections, given the fact that as former President Donald J. Trump prepares to return to the White House, we also have John Dramani Mahama making his way back to the seat of government. Whilst the U.S. government is commending Ghana for a peaceful and a historic feat, the U.S. Embassy here in Accra and the U.S. Secretary of State is equally concerned and alarmed about the killings or violence that erupted during this year's elections. And there you have the statement coming through on the presidential elections related to Ghana, a press statement from the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, pointing out to the fact that the United States is congratulating President-elect John Mahama on his successful campaign following the declaration of results by Ghana's Electoral Commission. Quote, we extend further congratulations to the Vice President-elect Nana Jane Opoku-Agyemang for becoming Ghana's first female Vice President. The United States commends the Electoral Commission, its hundreds and thousands of poll workers, civil society, and the country's security forces who helped to ensure a peaceful and transparent process. We also applaud Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia for his gracious acceptance of the results. We are aware of reports of isolated incidents of violence and at least 4 confirmed deaths. The United States extends our condolences to the families of the killed and urges full investigations and accountability. The U.S. is proud of the enduring partnership and friendship with the people and government of Ghana. And of course, the U.S. Secretary of State says is looking forward to working closely with President-elect John Dramani Mahama to carry out the historic relationship into the future. So that's the latest coming through from the United States government. Let's bring in Dr. Ishmael Lonvo, who's an international relations expert, joining us here on the show. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. I'm particularly concerned about the fact that this is coming through from the United States government, which earlier issued a warning that it will not issue visas to anyone who undermines the peace of this country. They are here again asking for further investigations into the killings, which is similar to what happened in the last elections. What does this signify in terms of the diplomatic implications for a country such as Ghana?
Thank you, and good evening to your viewers. I believe that the United States Embassy and the Secretary of State were right in calling for some action to be taken in relation to the reported incidences of killing in Ghana. Of course, given the general nature of the elections, it has won Ghana praise across the globe. I mean, so in terms of Ghana-US relation, is good for us because having chosen the democratic path and the US being a promoter of democracy, it means that we will have a continuous friendship, at least on the foot of democracy. But you see, the problem we have is that because over the years, we have not been able to deal with the cases of electoral violence. It seems to be part and parcel of our problem. In as much as it's not that well spread to discredit the election, we must find a way to deal with the isolated cases. And the problem is that we are not able to enforce the rules when it comes to some of these politically motivated killings. those who died and reports were commissioned, we have not seen any action on that. So it embodies anybody who want to do something like this. So I think that unless we are able to punish, unless we are able to enforce the rules, unless we are able to deal decisively with people who engage in politically motivated violence and killings, we may have to be dealing with these isolated cases. And once these isolated cases keep coming and we are not dealing with them over time, it may undermine the whole democracy. But that does not take away the shine of Ghana, the shine that we are experiencing now, that we have been able to change government peacefully in a region that this can be a very, very rare occurrence. We have done it over and over again. And therefore, you can see that the international community is actually jubilating and celebrating Ghana. Given what has happened in the sub-region within the last 2 to 3 years, this is a huge feat for Ghana. And I believe that it strengthens Ghana-US relation, it strengthens Ghana-Western relation. And of course, the new president have a work to do in making sure Ghana pursue a more balanced foreign policy or diplomatic engagement.
I'll get back shortly to what it is that Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been talking about in terms of what they are looking forward to once John Mahama takes over officially on the day of swearing in on January 7th. But I want us to talk equally about the 3 international organizations, including the African Union, which is now lauding us, except to say that they are confirming, first of all, the incidents of ballot duplication, and they are calling for more inclusivity in terms of having more women representation, and there are other pockets of issues that the Commonwealth and ECOWAS are talking about now. Having this sort of synergy in terms of the similarities in the message running through all these 3 international organizations, do you feel that there's more that we could be doing to further consolidate our position as a beacon of democracy that the US is, the AU is now referring to us?
Of course, democracy is a process. You don't get to a stage where you stop reforms. I remember from 1992 to today, every election that we have had is followed by some level of electoral reforms. So this is also another stage that we have reached, and what is happening now must lead us to further reforms. So, for instance, how do we deal with the fact that people are able to duplicate electoral material? So I think that when you look at the messages all of them are putting across, it means that, well, you have done well, but then it's not the end game. You have to work hard. And hopefully, and of course, to the credit of Ghana, we have always going to the next election, taking cue from what has happened, making necessary adjustments. So I believe that part of our electoral reform going into the 2028 will be how do we ensure that the ballot paper is so security proof that it's so difficult to duplicate. How do we ensure that issues of people maxing up at polling stations, which partly is a result of the delay in the release of the results. So what has happened is that the political parties have come out of a system that is faster than the EC. So they are able to collate their results and put it out there for their supporters. And when it happens like that, what happens is that once that information is consumed by the supporters, they are eager to know if the EC confirms or denies. And once the delay is coming, it suggests to them that something is being done to alter whatever result their political parties are putting across. So if not for the early concession of Dr. Bawumia, maybe the tension would have been more than what we have experienced. So I think I believe that yes, we have achieved a very great feat, but then as the 3 observer groups have said, there's more room for improvement. You need to improve. I believe that there's also need to improve the transparency of the counting process, so that we have shied away from introducing more of technology into the counting. But then in the world where technology is what defines society, we have to have that debate. How do you ensure that, for instance, immediately the ballots are counted in the polling station 1, right. There's a system where it is conveyed to the electoral commission, and everybody else can just go to a website or somewhere and know that in this ballot, in this polling station, this is the number of votes, this is what goes on to this one, and this is what goes on to this one. There are so many things that can be improved through technology, but because of trust issues, we are shying away from it. In as much as technology has its own limitations, I think that discussion has to happen where, because technology will allow you to have more transparency, it allows you to do real-time computation of the result and cut back the time that it takes for us to have results.
And probably we're not talking about this as much, the role of the international community in consolidating Ghana's democratic trajectory. Let's talk about that. It started off with the Peace Pact. We weren't making progress until the mediation team from the ECOWAS then intervened. We saw Mohamed Ibn Chambers come through, call on all parties to try as much as possible to accept peace. Then the U.S. government issued a warning that, well, look, we're not issuing visas if you undermine democracy. Fast forward, now we're seeing a call for investigations into the killing. The UK government also on the side doing quite a lot. AU, Commonwealth, the international community as a whole, the EU. Did that really matter to Ghanaians?
Of course, it matters for the process. If you look at the Peace Pact, for instance, once the international community comes in, even those who cannot trust our own domestic institutions, at least they bring a little bit more of credibility, particularly if they're able to conduct themselves in the manner that does not show that they are supporting one party against the other. That allowed them to bring some credibility, to bring some level of trust into the system. And they have always been part and parcel of Ghana's democratic journey. Indeed, as a growing democracy, we always need assistance from the international community to do some of the things that we want to do. And as you can see, they have pointed out areas that we need reform. So it's not like one of them is saying it, another one is not saying it. And that puts a little bit of issue on us to ensure that the things that they have raised, the Electoral Commission must take you. How do we ensure that these things that they have raised are addressed in the next election? So from the word go, if you talk about democracy in Ghana, you cannot talk about that without the international community, the election observation. They always bring that level of transparency, that level of credibility to the electoral process. Even when we cannot trust our domestic institution, they are able to mediate the tension. They are able to bring the parties together. Right. Of course, the U.S. Embassy's open threat of visa denial, I believe, was unnecessary. But of course, at the end of the day, I'm sure they have other ways of talking to our political actors beyond threatening openly visa restrictions. So yes, we can't talk about democracy in Ghana without the international community. They have always been part and parcel of it. They brought trust. Anytime tensions get out of hand, they are able to mediate between our political actors, and that has always been helpful to the country.
I see. What I want us to do now, I'll bring up shortly once again the U.S. Secretary of State's statement before we wrap up. But let's talk about the SAP region and what this election means for West Africa as a whole. Does it change anything? There's a backslide generally in democracy across the SAP region.
It gives hope that the backsliding of democracy over the last 3 to 4 years is not going to be the trend in some countries. That those countries with relatively stable democratic institutions will still hold their own. But it at least it gives that indication that countries like Ghana are going to hold their own when it comes to democracy. Right. But this election also gives the indication that democratically elected leaders must find a way to address the number of challenges facing their population, particularly the youthful population, because that's why we are losing the democratic practice. It's not only about elections. If we reduce it to elections alone, we will soon wake up one day and realize that even the very stable ones like Ghana are gone. So we see this huge mandate, we see this huge electoral outcome. It is good to celebrate that, but then you must realize that democracy will only get consolidated, will only get institutionalized in West Africa and Africa for that matter, if democracy is translated to tangible results that address the material well-being of the population. Okay. So yes, Ghana has set a stage, a pace in trying to demonstrate that in as much as we have had our brothers fallen, there are still evidence that the African can still nurture and promote democracy, at least an electoral democracy.
Yeah, but John Mahama will now have to deal with world leaders. That would include President Trump. Of course, the last leader to have met him was President Akufo-Addo. So we're not clear on what John Mahama's foreign policy posture will be towards the West. He's Russian trained, by the way, but of course, he's not been adverse to, the West as well, and having enjoyed, as the U.S. statement is pointing out, good relations. I want us to get back to that statement from the U.S. Secretary of State and to just point out the expectation of the U.S. Government on what they expect from the people of Ghana going forward. We'll get that for you shortly. But they talk about the fact that they're looking forward to, a very solid future with the people of Ghana. I'll quote that to you very shortly, but you've seen that already. So let's get into it. What's it going to be like in terms of the foreign policy for John Mahama now having to deal with a former president equally who's back at the White House?
Dealing with Trump is not something that is predictable. So I believe that the incoming president will have to prepare himself and his team. And of course, it's about pursuing a more balanced foreign policy instead of leaning heavily towards the West. You must have a kind of balancing act where you try to engage all the powers of the world. We have engagement with countries like China, countries like Russia, countries like the United States. We must ensure that we remain a very balanced, neutral player in global affairs and ensure that we derive the best benefit that we're near to us as Ghanaians. That the most important job for President Mahama is the interest of Ghana. And while we will have Trump in the White House, then Mahama must be ready to deal with issues of Ghanaians who are in the United States illegally, who are undocumented Ghanaians. So they must find a way to engage when it comes to Trump's decision to deport those brothers from Africa and other parts of the world. So they must prepare their own plan as to how they are going to engage. The last time that happened, the issue of identifying them, either they are truly Ghanaians, became an issue between Ghana and the United States. So we must envisage something like that and put in measures to ensure that if it comes to that, we are able to quickly identify those who are truly Ghanaians, and if we accept them, we accept them. We must engage because the statement that was put out is by the Biden administration, which is more favorable for us to deal with. But with Trump coming, that introduced that dynamic of issues of immigration, which Ghana may be at the receiving end, particularly if some of our brothers are undocumented. So we must put in place structures that ensure that when it comes to that stage, we are able to engage them and see how we can assist our brothers, identify those who are truly ours, if they need to bring them home and aid in reintegration and so forth and so on. That is one part of it. Another part of it is the fact that, as I said, President Mahama has to find a regional framework to address the Sahel state. Now, within the ECOWAS framework is fine, but then as a country, as a leader within the sub-region, we must find a framework beyond the ECOWAS framework, particularly in dealing with a country like Burkina Faso, because somehow we have alienated them in terms of our tough stand on democracy. Maybe as a new leader, he may have a little bit of credibility, he may have a little bit of how do I even put it? He may have a little bit of a reception from those leaders, and he may have to leverage on that to engage them and see how he can aid in the peaceful transition of those countries back to civilian rule. Because if they stay outside the ECOWAS framework as they are trying to do for too long, very soon we may have more complicated situations, because sooner than later they will move away from national interest pursuit to regime security and stability, and that will not be helpful to their citizens and to the sub-region. So I think being a new leader that is coming on the stage, he has that at least a clean sheet to try and find a framework to deal with the Sahel state beyond the ECOWAS framework. Of course, whatever he will do must be in line with what the whole ECOWAS sub-region agreed to do. Right. But he has at least the currency, as it were, now to try and see how he can use his personal and office and his office to engage those countries and find a way to mediate even between those countries and ECOWAS. So he is in a good place because he has just stepped in. The coups had happened before he is coming on board. So he will not be seen as a party to the earlier stance of ECOWAS. He may be able to do it, and given his experience, I think that he will be able to do that job.
Yeah, there's so much interesting facts and also dynamics to be on the lookout for within West Africa and beyond. But I'm grateful, Ishmael Hlonvo, international relations expert, joining us to talk about the international community's report on Ghana's presidential and parliamentary elections. But that's all we have for you here on Connect Africa. We'll see you again. I'm blessed if I log on to myjoyonline.com. More stories there for you.